Okay, so it says uh, agriculture part that first of all the first page was type of farming. There I told you that we have primitive subsistence farming, that means old method of
Yes, sir.
farming, right? Which have been doing we are doing have been for let's say many millenniums, I can say, because some since primitive time we have been doing this. And then we saw that the types of shifting cultivation, that is the names also. We saw that milpa and jhum and all these things in the first one, first page. Then we had another page which was about let's say further it says intensive subsistence farming. There I told you that intensively we are farming, that means we don't give the soil to rejuvenate, or we are using labor, and you can say the other resources such as fertilizers and other things. Okay, and that is also subsistence, that means for self sustenance. This is not again meant for the market, right? So that was another one. And then we saw that we have cropping pattern, where we saw that we have three types of crops, let's say rabi crops, kharif and jaid crops. That was there. And rabi crops, you know the timing. So timing, you have to remember the months I'm talking about. Let's say rabi is for winter, that means October to December, and harvested in let's say in April and May, March and April. Okay, that goes to June also in some parts. Then we have that is basically done in winter time, so that means in North India this rabi crop is there, right? Then we have kharif crop, right? And kharif crop is about the summer crop, or you can say the monsoon crop, and that is for rice and other things, right? Then we have let's say the jaid one. And jaid one is about, let's say, the cropping pattern between the two seasons, let's say kharif and rabi, right? So that time you can say, no, Kharif, yeah, Rabi, when the Rabi ends and Kharif starts before that, that means in the month of, let's say, April, May, June, okay, until the monsoon comes, that time we basically grow the vegetables, cucumber, watermelon, and all these things. We grow there, right? Then we came to let's say basically a particular type of food, let's say rice. Then what is the geographical condition for growing rice, and in what kind of climate and what kind of soil rice is grown, and what are the prerequisites. That means a lot of water, 6 inches, 6 centimeter water minimum should be there, right? Those things. Then we had wheat was for you can say North India, right? That is a rabi crop. And there we saw that how much rainfall is needed, that means 50 to 75% of rainfall is centimeter of rainfall is annually needed. And it is done in basically Ganga Satluj plains in northwest, and black soil in Deccan. There, that means wherever a little bit winter is there, especially Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, and Rajasthan. Right, that happened. Then millet is another one. Then we have bajra, maize, all these things are there. Okay, so you have to understand the memorize the geographical conditions. Then pulses, of course, pulses is important because throughout the country we use pulses. Okay, and because of the heavy consumption of pulses, we have to most of the time import pulses. But here the scientific thing is that it helps the cultivation of pulses helps in the restoring soil fertility by fixing nitrogen from the air, right? Okay, so and pulses are basically grown in Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, and Karnataka, right? Other crops, let's say sugar cane was there. Sugar cane needs how much temperature and how much rainfall. That means 21 degree to 27-degree temperature should be there. Okay, 75 centimeter to 100 centimeters should be rainfall, right? And it takes around 9 to 10 months to mature. Then we had oil seeds. Of course, oil seeds, every food need oil seeds. So how India grows oil seeds, and basically because of heavy demand, we are not able to supply, or we are not able to produce that much oil seeds. So because of that, what happens that we import most of the oil, right? And that is from Malaysia, Indonesia, and all countries. We import palm oil. Okay, so that is done here. It's not written about it, but I tell you the real situation. So groundnut is again a kharif crop, and groundnut was there, and the mustard seed and other seeds were there. Now it talks about tea plantation. So tea plantation, you know that tea is basically on the hills. Okay, in the lower Himalayas we grow tea. Then we grow tea in in you can say in South India also on the hills, right? So Ooty and Kodaikanal and those areas. Then in Kerala also we grow tea. Okay, those things are there because of the hills, and the geographical conditions are conducive there to grow tea. So that we do. And in Assam Hills, the Darjeeling tree is very popular. Even you see here, one packet comes. If you go to stores, you will see Janet tea comes, that is produced in Darjeeling and packed in France, right, and sold everywhere. So you can see the Darjeeling tea is basically world famous tea, and it has varieties, right? Meghalaya, Uttarakhand, and all these areas we grow tea. Then coffee is another beverage plant we have. Let's say Indian coffee is known in the world for its good quality. So, and we grow Arabica variety of coffee, which basically came from Yemen. So that was there. So then horticulture crops. Wait a minute. Horticulture crops also we have already done that one. That was page number 41 basically. Okay, so horticulture crops, that means in 2017 India was the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables in the world after China. So India is a producer of tropical as well as temperate fruits, because in lower hills of Himalayas we have temperate climate, so there we grow temperate fruits like apple and all, right? And in other areas, let's say in North India, and you can say that means Madhya Pradesh and Bihar, Bengal, that area, plus in entire plateau area, and in South India we grow varieties of you can say tropical fruits, right? So those are there. Let's say banana, lychee, guava, mango. All these things are grown in India. About horticulture. All right. Further, it says. Then we talk about non-food crops. Okay, non-food crops is at page number 40. Page number 40. Okay, page number 40 is non-food crops, and there we saw that. No, just a minute. Where is that? Yeah, page number 42. Sorry, page number 42. Non-food crops are there. Okay, and that means the crops which we don't eat. So that is basically rubber and fiber crops and all. So now I start from here. Okay, so that was your recapitulation. That was we quickly we revised. Now I'm going to start with this. So it says it is an equatorial crop, but under the special condition, it is also grown in tropical and subtropical areas because of the biotechnology, and you can say so gene technology. We have a lot of extensive research. That means the entire world on this have done, right? And we try to maximize the area for rubber crops, because rubber is an essential part of our, you can say, our daily life, because we use rubber things, lot of things, and the automobile sector, tires and all these things, they use a lot of rubber, right? So not only the equator area, we can grow in tropical and subtropical area also, right? Wherever the temperature is around 25 degree plus, and around you can say 200 degree Celsius, 200 centimeter of rainfall we have, there we can grow. So rubber is an important industrial raw material, and it is mainly grown in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andaman. You will see that in Indonesia, then you can see in Malaysia, not too much in Malaysia, but of course in Thailand, extensive agriculture, of rubber takes place. So they have cut the primary forest, and rubber crops are being grown over there. So that was there, and it is basically capital based industry, capital based crops. That means you need a lot of capital, because it's not a small plot of land you can grow rubber, right? So there you need hundreds of hectares of land you need, because many thousands of trees will be there. Then you need a lot of scientists, the expert in rubber plantation, those people are needed. Then you need you can say a lot of labor also, because it's a labor intensive also, especially because every rubber tree has to be must we have a cut over there, so that the latex should come ooze out, and that should be collected in a pot or something. So if you have, let's say, several thousand trees, so every tree after maturity you have to make a cut in that, and so that the rubber juice should come, and that is collected. So every morning if you do that, that means you have to collect from every plant. Okay, and again you have to make sure that everything is going well and all these things. So it is capital as well as labor intensive crop. Okay, next come fiber crop. So cotton, jute, hemp and natural silk are the four major fiber crops grown in India. The first three are derived from the crops grown in the soil. Okay, so cotton, jute, and hemp is basically crops. So that means we grow in soil, and another one, that means the silk is obtained from the cocoons of the silkworm. You already know about, in science also you have studied. So rearing of silkworm is for the production of silk fiber is known as sericulture. So this is also one mark question, that what is sericulture. So you will say the production of silkworm, or you can say getting silk. Okay, so it's a silk culture.
Yes.
That one. Then it talks about cotton. India is believed to be the original home of the cotton plant. We believe. Why do we believe? I tell you, because when Indus Valley civilization was there around from today, you can say around 4,000 years ago or 4,500 years ago, in Mohenjo-daro, Lothal, Kalibangan, okay, in the Harappa, in those areas, we found the evidence, or you can say the traces of cotton cloth, right? So that shows that around 4,500 years ago or 5,000 years ago, we were very much good at cotton cultivation plus making clothes from there, right? So, and since that time you can say since that time we have been champion in you can say textile production, especially the the cotton production, because before the Britishers came, or you can say during the Mughal time in 1300 1400 plus, India was exporting cotton throughout the world, and in Europe it was so popular that it was very expensive, and it was so popular that the British government had to impose ban, or you can say impose a heavy tax on the consumption of Indian cotton. Okay, so if you have a, let's say, one square feet of cotton cloth, right, you have to pay a lot of money, because Indian clothes were very very fine quality as well as very expensive also. And it was expensive because it was hugely popular over there, right? So that was there. So it says in 2017 India was the second largest producer of cotton after China. So mostly you will see that China is leading in all the you can say crops. So cotton grows well in the drier parts of the black cotton soil in the Deccan Plateau. It requires high temperature, light rainfall or irrigation, 210 frost free days, so that the bulb of cotton can dry, okay, and it can grow nicely because of high temperature, and bright sunshine for its growth. It is a kharif crop and requires 6 to 8 months to mature. So around, you can say, 6 to 8 months we need to mature. Now many types of hybrid seeds are also in the market, so that that needs less water, plus it takes less time to mature, so that you can have two you can say two crops a year. Depends upon the rainy season and all these things, but basically it takes 6 to 8 months. Okay, there. Huh. Okay, leave it later. Then major cotton producing states are Maharashtra, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and then you have then you have Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh. In these states, in Punjab, Haryana also we grow, because rainy season is let's say for another 2 3 months, right? Okay, on most of the time you have good temperature, so there also we can grow. Another one is jute. It is known as a golden fiber. So remember this, jute is known as golden fiber. So jute grows well on well drained fertile soil in the floodplains, where soil are renewed every year because of the floodplain area, right? High temperature is required during the time of growth. West Bengal, Bihar, Assam, Odisha and Meghalaya are the major jute producing states. So I tell you how jute is good. Jute is just like a grass, okay, and grass is it has a stick, right, that goes up to more than a human height, right, or you can say 1.5 times of human height, right? And when it matures, then we cut it, and we put it in the water. That means it needs a lot of water, right? So whether the canal or ponds, or you can say the lakes or the rivers, where there we leave it for a few days. When it starts fermenting, you can say that means it becomes soft. Then we thrash that bundle of, you can say, sticks, okay, in the water, and this is how the fiber comes out. Okay, rest science work over there, right? So in West Bengal, Bihar, Assam, Odisha, Meghalaya are the major jute producing states. So this is water intensive plant plus labor intensive plant also, because you need people, okay, to do that. And it is used in making gunny bags, mats, ropes, yarn, carpet and other artifacts. When plastic bags came after that, of course the importance of jute went down, right? And that plastic bag also came because it was light in weight and it was durable and it was waterproof. That is why. But now when we talk about environment, and you already know that how plastics are harmful for the environment, again people are moving towards, or you can say turning towards jute production, or you can say jute things or organic things, right? Okay, or biodegradable things. So again it is gaining momentum, and it is used for textile also a little bit. So due to its high cost, it's losing market to the synthetic fiber and packing material, particularly the nylon, or you can say the plastic one, okay, plastic bags. But again it is now gaining importance now, because you see in many cities or in many countries plastic is banned, right? Okay, you can see in Japan what happens then when you go to a shop, right? They ask you whether you want to buy a plastic bag for 2 yen or 3 yen or 5 yen, right? That means you have to pay for that. And because of that, what we do, that we carry our own bags. We don't buy that bag. So this is how the Japanese government is trying to control the production or use of plastic bags, and this is what India is also doing now. Okay, so this is how we can save the environment, and for the environmental purpose, of course, it is done. And Japan is one of the largest producer of garbage, or you can say the plastic waste in the world. Okay, see the things, the foods are packed in plastic containers and all these things, so that create a lot of wastage. Okay, and the bottled drink and all. But anyway, so it says that those things are there. Now we are talking about technological and institutional reform. So now when we talk about technology, I understand that what kind of technological development may take place in agriculture. But when we talk about institutional reform, we have to understand that how the government works, the banks, okay, the loan and the credits organizations, how they give loans to the farmers, or you can say the insurance. These are the institutional reform that we will talk. So it says, it was mentioned in the previous pages that agriculture has been practiced in India for thousands of years. Sustained use of land without compatible techno-institutional changes have hindered the pace of agricultural development. That means if you want to have sustainable development, or you can say sustainable growth of agriculture in India, it cannot be done just because you have good soil. Government have to, let's say governments have to give promotion, then governments have to protect the farmers, okay, because of the natural calamities, a lot of flood. You see what is happening in South India and in the North India, in Uttarakhand and all these things. A lot of rainfall has devastated a lot of things over there in Kerala and all, right? So government have to come up with some ideas, or you can say you can say some help to those farmers who get destroyed, or you can say completely bankrupt because of these natural calamities. So that is called institutional reform or institutional help. So techno-institutional changes have hindered the pace of agricultural development. In spite of development of sources of irrigation, most of the farmers in large part of the country still depend upon the monsoon and natural fertility in order to carry on their agriculture. So we have developed canals and other things. There are also mostly the people depend on the monsoon, because monsoon is the natural thing and it gives you rain for free, water for free, right? Okay, but that is not the way. You cannot, because sometimes monsoon fail, and after that you don't the agricultural production throughout the country goes down, and because of that the that particular year GDP goes down, and then farmers are in bad shape. That means they don't have enough money and all these things. So government has to make sure that in spite all the things, they should get regular regular supply of water and other things. So it says, for a growing population, especially India, this poses a serious challenge, because if we are around 1.4 billion population we have, okay, and if monsoon fails, or if too much of flood and all, because of that, if one portion or one state, or let's say more than one or two states, if they get badly affected, that means entire agricultural output will go down, right? So in that case, government has to come up with some kind of plan. So it says that agriculture, which provides livelihood for more than 60% of its population, needs some serious technical and institutional reforms. That means better quality of seed, okay, fertilizers, organic fertilizers, or awareness is also important, that how much chemical fertilizers are harmful and good for you. That means better seed, that means that matures early, which is pest resistance, then which doesn't need much water. That kind of seeds must be invented, or you can say designed. That is called biotech. So that should take place. Okay, and these are the technical things. Thus collectivization, consolidation of holdings, cooperation, and abolition of jamindari, etc., were given priority to bring about the institutional reform in the country after independence. So what we did, that we started collectivization.
Can I go now? She was in CAPS clinic.
Okay, so
She said, I'm at home now, you can come. But it is very late today.
it's 9 o'clock already.
Mm.
Okay, so collectivization, that means what happens in collectivization? That means suppose you have, just consider your case, you live in Kirigavka. So one piece of land you have near Big Yosan, another piece of land near your school you have, another piece of land somewhere at the bus stand, okay, another piece of land you have, let's say, in Tokaichiwa area. So in that case you have your land scattered everywhere, right? So you cannot concentrate, or you cannot use technology, okay, because small patches of land or the pieces of land you have everywhere. So what government did, that government started exchange offer, or you can say exchange. That means you take my land, I take your land, okay, Ishana can take your land, and you can give Ishana your. In that case, well, this is how we can consolidate our land at one place. Okay, so now I have a big piece of land because I had a trade off. That means I exchange with the other farmers, right? And there I can make my house, or you can say I can have my own irrigation system. I can look after my crops nicely. Okay, I can have orchard and everything we can do there. So this is what collectivization was, consolidation of holding and all these things. Cooperation and abolition of jamindari system. Jamindari, the landlords. So landlords, when all these things, these landlords actually were not paying attention to the agricultural reform. So what they used to do is they were basically absentee landlord. That means they used to live in the cities and the towns, okay, and their lands used to be in the villages. So they were more keen on collecting taxes, okay. They were not keen on introducing any kind of reform in agriculture, or you can say uh, giving some benefits to the farmers, okay. So most of the farmers, or most of the people in the villages, were basically the tenants, or you can say the wage workers on their land, right? So because of that there was no motivation, right? And that because of that there was no agricultural reform also. So government abolished this system that was there. They were given priority to bring the institutional reform in the country after independence. Land reform was the main focus in our first 5-year plan. So first 5-year plan started in 1951 to 56. That was first 5-year plan. Now what is 5-year plan? Let me tell you. This is a Russian model actually. So Russia started this after 1917, and we copied from there because we were heavily influenced by Russia during our independence struggle and all. So we, after independence, we copied the Russian plan, because in Russian plan what was there, that they used to make 5-year plan, and there they used to focus on certain things. Let's say this year we are focusing on agriculture, and this transport or education or health and all these things. So this is how they have started. So we liked that idea, and we started, and especially in 1947 when we got independence. That time we saw that we are in very bad shape, because the country doesn't have enough food, right? The country doesn't have industries. So first of all, people need what? People need food. So we focus more on food. So that means most of the resources the government had, okay, that was devoted to agricultural reforms, or you can say agricultural production, so that people should have food, right? And we should not import food from the foreign country, because importing food costs a lot of money, right? That is going to be expensive, and we have fertile land, we have everything, so why not to produce our own? So the first 5-year plan was aimed towards agriculture, and second 5-year plan was aimed towards aimed towards industry, that means industrialization, because you need many things, okay, from the needle to pens, pencil, and many other things you need. So industries are also needed. So these were the 5-year plan. So the right of inheritance had already led to the fragmentation of land holdings, necessitating consolidation of holdings. So, right of inheritance means after the death of the father, the land goes to whom? Right. So, let's say a father has 3 sons. So, whatever land he had, that will be divided into 3 sons. Right. So, that means the size of the plot will get smaller and smaller. Generation by generation after generation. Okay, so that was another problem. So okay, so this is how it started. The law of land reforms were enacted, but the implementation was lacking or lukewarm, because people, okay, reforms are fine, but basically the government organizations or the government servants and the people were not very much interested in all these things. That means it was not implemented wholeheartedly, and that is why it did not work much. So the government of India embarked upon introducing agricultural reform to improve Indian agriculture in 1960s and 70s. See, 1960 or 70, you see, was the area, was the year, or you can say the decade when India and China were in the same condition. Okay, but see today where China is. In 1970, China started its development. That means before 1970, China was in a very poor. China was a very poor country, right? And if you see the great famine of China, there you will see that people killed all the birds, because the leader told that if the birds eat a lot of seeds, so we should kill the birds so that we should have more food. That was the condition. So people started killing the birds, and because of that, there was a huge you can say disturbance in the food chain system, because the birds used to eat a lot of insects from the farms, right? So insects grew a lot, and because of that, crop failed in entire China, and it remained for many years. People started cutting the trees, right, so that the birds should not be there. All lot of that means in China was in a very bad shape sometimes in 1960 and 70. But since 1970, China started its development path of development, and you see today where China is, right? Okay, so India and China were in the same boat, right? But China, moved very fast, and because of the you can say not having democratic system, right? Whatever China you can say dictatorship type of thing was there, though it was not a dictatorship exactly. But China moved very fast, and China is now China, right? Okay, you can say China is flexing its muscle every time in front of the US and other world powers. So this happens anyway. That was a little out of topic. So the Green Revolution, based on the use of the package technology, and the White Revolution, Operation Flood, were some of the strategies initiated to improve the lot of Indian agriculture. When we talk about agriculture, we do not only talk about farming, we talk about animal husbandry also. So agriculture means farming plus animal husbandry. That means the milk. Okay, so Green Revolution was for the crops, and the White Revolution was for milk. That means we should have better breeds of animals. You can say the cows, the buffaloes, right? So that we have more amount of you can say milk, right? Because milk is also a staple food. Okay, and so these two were very important here. So better variety of you can say the animals, then better food to them, so that they can produce more milk and all these things. Okay, so that was Operation Flood. So remember, Operation Flood was aimed for production of milk, and Green Revolution was basically you can say for crop production, right? So Green Revolution and White Revolution. But this led to the concentration of the development in few selected areas. But if this was like that, because see, if the central government implements one policy, let's say Green Revolution, why it was not everywhere? Why all the states did not flourish in the same way, the way Haryana and Punjab and Western UP flourished? It was because it remained concentrated in few pockets. So you can say that because of the politicians or whatever you say, that means that was mostly successful in some parts of the country, not everywhere, right? So it says therefore in 1980s and 1990s, a comprehensive land development program was initiated, which included both the institutional and technical technical reforms. So institutional reforms, that means giving Kisan credit card, that means credit card to the farmers. Then insurance, crop insurance was done. Then easy loan was given to them if they want to have, let's say, dairy farming and all these things if they want to have, right? So how to procure loan to buy buffaloes and cows, those things were, that means these were the institutional reforms. Technology was already there, or you can say that was also introduced, so that more production can take place in both the area, that means the farm also and the dairy farming also, both. So provision for crop insurance against drought, flood, cyclone, fire and disease. Establishment of Grameen banks, you can say the village banks, the cooperative societies, banks for providing loan facilities. These are the institutional reforms. So remember this question, let's say come for 3 marks, you have to write all these things. Okay. So providing loan facilities to the farmers at lower rate of interest were some important steps in this direction. So this is how it started. Then Kisan credit card, that is also called KCC. Yeah, KCC, personal accident insurance scheme, or some other schemes introduced by the government for the benefit of the farmers. Moreover, special weather bulletins and agriculture programs for farmers were introduced on the radio and television. So radio used to have, on the television used to have Krishi Darshan. I don't know whether Darshan now telecast those things or not. This was meant for basically the you can say the rural population, or you can say the towns, because in towns also those people had the village connection. Let's say the earning member lives in the town, right? But his lands and the parents and all this, they are in the villages only. Okay. So on radio and on television, these agriculture related programs were aired, so that people can listen to them, and they can introduce those reforms or those techniques, in their farm to grow more food. Okay. The government also announces minimum support price, that's also called MSP. Yeah, MSP, remunerative and procurement prices for important crops to check the exploitation of farmers by speculators and middlemen. Now do you understand the meaning of MSP? MSP. Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
What is MSP?
Minimum support price.
Oh my god, I did not know that. What is that, by the way? Okay, I tell you. Once the crop is harvested, government announces that this is the lowest rate anyone can sell his or her crop. Okay, that means government announces, just consider one case, let's say 100 kg of wheat. This year the government has announced, let's say 2000 rupees 100 kg of wheat. That means government announces that any farmer must not sell 100 kg of wheat for less than 2000 rupees. Okay, so that is called minimum support price, right? So let's say I am a trader, okay, and you are farmer. So I would like to exploit you, and I will say no, I will not offer more than 1600 or let's say 1500. You can say that government has announced 2000. How can you offer 1600 or 1700? So this year MSP is 2000. That means I will, or you will sell to me at minimum 2000 rupees. Okay, so this is how government tried to avoid, or you can say the exploitation of farmers by the speculators and the middlemen, because middlemen will always try to have more margins, right? And they do this in this way, that they offer you less price and they will sell later, at higher price. Okay, so this is how the farmers are always, they become sandwich. So in that case, to avoid this situation, the government announces MSP. This year also MSP has, every year government does for every crop. Let's say rice, wheat, sugar, then other crops also, millet and oilseed. For everything, government announces MSP, so that farmers should know that what MSP is, and they should sell at that price only. Okay, or less, more than that, not less than that. So that was one. Now it says that Bhudan. Bhudan means Bhumi Kadan. That means donation of land to the landless people. So that was done by Vinoba Bhave. So Mahatma Gandhi declared Vinoba Bhave as his spiritual heir, or that means he also participated in Satyagraha as one of the foremost Satyagrahi. He was one of the votaries of Gandhi's concept of Gram Swaraj. After Gandhi martyrdom, Vinoba Bhave uh, undertook Padayatra, that means on foot, to spread Gandhiji's message, covered almost the entire country. Once he was delivering a lecture on Pochampalli in Andhra Pradesh. Some poor landless villagers demanded some land for their economic well-being. Vinoba Bhave could not promise it to them immediately, but assured them to talk to the government of India regarding provision for land for them if they undertook cooperative farming. So, if these farmers start cooperative farming, not a personal asset, so this will be given to them. The land, patch of land will be given to them. Okay, and whatever the number of families they are working on that, the crop should be shared among them according to the work ratio or according to the whatever. Okay, suddenly Sri Ramchandra Reddy stood up and offered 80 acres of land to be distributed among 80 landless villagers. So this Ramchandra Reddy might be having hundreds of acres. So he offered that 80 acres of land I can donate to 80 landless villages, and this act was known as Bhudan. So this was one of the examples, and after that this started. That means Vinoba Bhave thought that why not other landlords should also be encouraged to donate land to the landless people in their villages, so that everyone should have piece of land. So this act was known as Bhudan. Later he travelled and introduced his ideas widely all over India. Some jamidars, owners of many villages, offered to distribute some villages among the landless. It was known as Gram Dan. So many jamindars were so rich that they had many villages under their control. Okay, that means they used to own those villages. So think about the villages and the surrounding land, right? So some of the jamindars, or you can say the landlords, offered villages also, that okay, you take this village, whatever the land is there, that should be distributed among the villages. So this is how it started. So Bhudan, Gram Dan, all these started. However, many landowners chose to provide some part of their land to the poor farmers due to the fear of land ceiling act, because government was thinking about it seriously, that those absentee landlords, those who actually do not cultivate their own land, that land should be given to the actual tenant, that means the person who works on that land, right? So if this happens, let's say I am a landlord, okay, and I have 200 acres of land. I personally cannot do agriculture of entire land, so I have hired so many people, okay, many villagers work on my land, but actually that land belongs to me, but actually I physically am not available on those land, and I'm not working on that. So the person, whoever ABC is working on that piece of land, it should be given to them. So this kind of system also there was in air, that means government was planning to introduce. So because of the fear of that, these landlords donated some land so that they can get some discount from the government.
Did I learn decimals?
No.
Then I know.
Yeah, you have learned decimals when you do the fraction work.
3 upon
Yeah, so 3. Okay, leave it. I will tell you later. How many however, many landlords chose to provide some part of their land to the poor farmers due to the fear of land ceiling act. That means one person cannot have more than this much of land. So that was called land ceiling act. This Bhudan Gramdan movement, initiated by Vinoba Bhave, is known as bloodless revolution. That means, see, revolution took place in Russian Revolution in 1917. Why? Because there was a fight between haves and have-nots. That means those who have a lot, okay, and those who do not have anything, right? There was a fight between them, right? And because of that, what happened? That entire country was socialized, or you can say it came under the government control, and government gave to the landless people and all. This is how it worked, right? So that was a revolution which killed so many people, and many things happened over there. And but this was actually a bloodless revolution. That means no blood was, blood shedding did not take place over there, or no blood spilled. So contribution of agriculture to the national economy. Now see, when we talk about GDP, agriculture contributes a lot, because India being such a big country, we have a lot of fertile land, because you see from north to south, east to west, we have a lot of rivers, right? and water is there, fertile land is there. So naturally, India, since ancient time, India has been an important producer of agricultural food. So, today also it contributes a lot. So it says that gross domestic product. What is the meaning of gross domestic product? I just give you in one line that the total amount of goods and services produced in the country, right? I reframe: the money value of total goods and services produced in a country in a year is called GDP. The money value of all the goods and services produced in a country in a year is called GDP. So let's say if I talk about GDP of 2020, 2021 is how much, right? Because of Corona, you see that industries and other services did not work properly. So GDP must have gone down, right? So GDP, that means in a particular year, how much was the money value of the total goods and services produced in the country. So it says has registered a declining trend from 1951 onwards. In 2011, about 52% of the total work force was employed in the farm sector, which makes more than half of the Indian population. So it says, it gives the data of 2010 and 11. What is your data? Same or something else?
Sir, it's 2010 to 11.
Okay, all right. So your book says that one. My book says yeah, same thing. So 52% of the total workforce, that means all the able-bodied people, those who can work, right? 52% of them are associated with the farm sector, which makes more than half of the Indian population dependent on agriculture for sustenance. That means they survive on this only. Okay, the declining share of agriculture in the GDP is a matter of serious concern. Now, what is happening that many people are leaving agriculture and they are becoming wage laborers, or you can say migrating to the cities, because now agriculture is not so profitable for them. Okay, so in that case, what happens that many pieces of land are not being cultivated. Okay, many people you don't find in the villages. When I go to my village, I see that most of the youth have already migrated to the cities and towns for industrial work or for other work and better living and all these things. Okay, so we don't find many people to work in the farm, right? So now this is good also and this is bad also, because see, everybody has the right to earn and earn their livelihood. So in that case, people are migrating. That is a bad thing. But another way you will see that, okay, this is how we are minimizing the dependency on agriculture, and now we are introducing more machines, because people are not manually, people are not there available, okay, for manual work. So naturally you have to have a substitute. And what is the substitute? The machines. The alternatives are there. So now we are using machines, okay, that take place. So it says the declining share of agriculture in GDP is a matter of serious concern. That means we are not producing that much. This is happening because industrial sector and service sector is growing in India more, right? So this takes place. Further, it says that stagnation in agriculture will lead to the decline in other sphere of economy, having wider implications for society. So if the agriculture remains stagnant or it declines, you will have a serious problem. Why you will have serious problem? That because agriculture is not only about the food, it provides a lot of raw material to the industries. Let's say cotton, jute, rubber, tea, coffee, many other things come from agriculture. So if agriculture does not take place in our country, then the raw materials will be less. If raw materials will be less, industry will decline, right? The workforce will be unemployed. So this is not a good sign. So considering the importance of agriculture in India, the government of India made concerted efforts to modernize agriculture, establishment of Indian Council of Agricultural Research, that is called ICAR. That means here a lot of research takes place related to agriculture. This is also a good option for you can say for your career. So if you are good at, let's say, biology and let's say further in botany and all these things, okay, you can join ICAR, and there you become a scientist, agriculture scientist, and you can invent, design new seeds and all these things. So that's a good career option. Agriculture universities are there, veterinary services and animal breeding centers are there, horticulture development, research and development in the field of meteorology, and weather forecast is also important because weather forecast is very important for agriculture, right? So correct forecasting is very good for the farmers, right? Just consider that if I knew that after 2 days, let's say, there will be a rainfall and my crops are already ready to be harvested in the farm, right? And I have this news that after 2 years, let's say by Sunday or Saturday it is going to rain, I will try to cut all the or harvest all my crops, okay, and I will bring it to the safer place. Because if my my crops are ready, it has already matured, and that time if it rains, that means everything will be soiled, or you can say the fungus will grow in that. So correct forecast is also very important. So these were the given priority for improving Indian agriculture. Apart from this, improving the rural infrastructure was also considered essential for the same. Rural infrastructure means electricity, roads, okay, schools, all these things. Because if you go to school, you get education, then you can be an educated farmer, right? If transportation system is there, all the villages are connected with the roads, all where the roads are there, then you can transport easily your crops to the market, the nearest market. So for that also you need, okay, so electricity, transportation, schools, hospitals, or you can say the clinics, and all these things are the infrastructure development in rural areas also. So government focused on that also. Today you see most of the villages, almost all the villages in India, 600,000 plus villages we have in India. All the villages are now well connected to the main road, okay, and to the towns and cities with electricity and all. So this is how we are developing the rural areas, and especially under the Article 73rd amendment. Okay, now when panchayati election, or you can say the local government election, became mandatory, right? So those the village headmen and those local government, of course, work on that, right? And this is how we are empowering the rural areas also. So here it says from the table 4.1, it is clear that though the GDP growth rate is increasing over the year, it is not generating sufficient employment opportunities in the country. So this you have to understand. This question may come that though the GDP is growing, but it is not providing employment. Okay, so the growth rate in agriculture has been decelerating, which is an alarming situation. That means agriculture is not growing properly. You will see that year by year the production is going down, or you can see your input is more than the output. Suppose your input is 1,000 rupees, right, and after 3 months of hard work you get 1,500 rupees or 2,000 rupees, then you will say that why did I work for only 1,000 rupees, right? It is better that I should migrate to a town and city. Even if I pull rickshaw or I do something, I will earn more than this, right? So why to have this kind of things? And there here also, and in agriculture what happens, you are taking a big risk, because you never know that whether it will rain or not, whether it will rain too much or too less. In that condition, whatever input you have invested there, that will be gone, right? So it's a really very big tension for the agriculturist. So today Indian farmers are facing a big challenge from international competition and reduction in the public investment in agriculture sector. So now we are living in the world of globalization. So what happens that we can get everything from everywhere. So in that case, what happens that any country which grows a lot of things, okay, whether it is food or industry, basically we will talk about food mostly here. So they supply cheaply in the international market, so the traders will buy from them. Okay, so traders will buy from them. So you see when you go to the shop, you see that majority of the food come from the foreign country. Let's say onion come from New Zealand or Australia. Then you see the fruits come from other country, mostly Philippines and all this, right? Okay, all these things happen in Japan. You see those things. So the Japanese farmers also face competition because of the globalization, right? The another thing is here that okay, they might not be able to produce so much. That is why the traders or the government have to import. That's a different situation. But in our country, what happens that if I'm offering my product at this level, in international market is very cheap, it is already available, so the traders will not buy from me, they will buy from international market. So in that case my product is not sold, or it remains unsold. So to sell those products, because these products are perishable items, so I have to sell it at the throwaway prices. So in that case, eventually I feel that I have been cheated, or it is a loss. So why to have that kind of farming, right? So government must pitch in this, and the government should try to control the situation. All right. So, moreover, reduction in import duties on agricultural products have proved detrimental to agriculture in the country. So, what happens that developed countries try to pressurize the developing countries to reduce the import duties on food. Now, think about the U.S. wheat. The U.S. wheat and corn and all these things are produced in several hundred thousand, I would say, several million tons, metric tons, and all these things, right? But the consumption is not that much in that country because population is too less, right? If you add, let's say, Bihar, Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, right, that much is the population. These three states will be equal to the entire population of the US, okay, because they have around 300 million, right? 300 million, 30 crore population we have, they have, right? These 30 crore we can find from the three states, Bihar, Bengal, Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra will be sufficient and 30 crore population they have, let's say, right, and they produce a lot. So naturally they sell in they want to sell in the other market, but when they sell, they find that India has imposed 100% tax. That means $10 goods will be $20 when it enters India. So that means it will be already expensive, right? And Indian farmers are selling at, let's say, $15. So naturally people will buy from the Indian farmer, because that the imported food is $20. So in that case, the government of the US would try to pressurize the Indian government to lower the import taxes, so that their product should also be competitive in the market, right? And in that case, what happens? Eventually our farmers lose. Okay, so this is all economics. So farmers are withdrawing their investment from agriculture, causing a downfall in the employment in agriculture. That means more employment is not taking place much in agriculture. Investment is not so much. Let's say people grow let's say chili, or you can say mango and other fruits. If you make achar, the pickles, that is related to agriculture. So if less production will take place, that means less industries, food processing industries will be available. Okay, less food processing industries means less employment will be generated, right? So this is not a good idea. Okay. So this is not a good idea. So in that case, we have to improve, we have to invest more in agriculture, so that we can have more employment there. Not because of because farming and farmers and all, it is because of the food processing units and other import and export and all these things. Okay. Impact of globalization on agriculture, this is what I was talking about. So globalization is not a new phenomenon. It was there at the time of colonization also, because if you have studied grade 9 history, or you can say some of the chapters you are not studying in grade 10, during Great Depression. Did you know that when did Great Depression take place in the US? Hello?
Are you teaching one person?
No, two. Great Depression took place in 1928-1929. Okay, and that took place in the US, and because of that, entire world was affected.
This
Okay.
one? This
Yeah.
one?
Yes, sir.
So that was that. So you see that in 1928 it was that took place in the US, and Indian farmers were suffering because the cotton was they were not getting enough price for their cotton and other products. So that time also globalization was there, right? Now also we are living in the same globalized world. So because of the free flow of goods, because we have the agreements between the countries, so whoever or whatever country produces at a cheaper rate, everywhere it goes, like the Chinese goods, going everywhere. You see, in India, the Chinese phone and Chinese goods are so popular. The crackers, or you can say the lights and mobile phone and other things, that Indian producers are not able to compete with them. So this is because of the globalization. So globalization is not a new phenomenon. It was there at the time of colonization. In the 19th century, when European traders came to India, at that time too, Indian spices were exported to different countries of the world. Okay, and farmers of South India were encouraged to grow these crops because there was a huge demand of those crops in European countries, right? So that time also globalization were there because we were exporting to them, right? So till today it is one of the important items of export from India. During British period, cotton belts of India attracted the British, and ultimately cotton was exported to Britain as raw material for their textile industry. So India became a raw material supplier. Okay, and you have already studied that the raw materials are always cheaper when it is processed. Then the value is added in that, and then it becomes expensive. So India was cotton producer at that time. So cotton textile industry in Manchester and Liverpool flourished due to the availability of good quality cotton from India. So basically they used to procure cotton from India and Egypt. Okay, so Egyptian cottons are also very good. So uh, you have read about the Champaran movement, which started in 1917 in Bihar. This was started because of the farmers of that region were forced to grow indigo, indigo, the blue color, of on their land because it was necessary for the textile industries which were located in Britain. So for coloring purpose, that was needed, and that was a tropical you can say crop, and India was their colony, so they forced the farmers to grow indigo, right? And because of that the farmers in that area were not able to grow food, so starvation was there, right? So Gandhiji, with his effort, this was stopped. So they were unable to grow food grains to sustain their families. So this was taking place, and blue is one of the primary colors. So that was used for mixing with to produce many colors. Later, what happened that with the invention of synthetic colors, the indigo plantation, the indigo was not much in demand, and this is how the British government also thought that okay, let's put an end to it. So that happened under globalization, particularly after 1990s. Okay, in 1991, or you can say we had WTO, World Trade Organization, right? And that we all the countries became part of that. We had an agreement for free flow of the goods and information, people, capital, that means money to invest in other countries, right? So what we will invest in other countries, they invested more in our country. What we will export to them, they exported more to our country. So India became a window, or you can say a big market for them, right? To dump their goods and make money. So you can see in Indian market also lot many companies which are overseas company, or you can say the foreign multinational companies, they are making a lot of money from toothpaste to cold drinks and all this, right? Okay, so despite being an important producer of rice, cotton, rubber, tea, coffee, jute, spices, our agricultural products are not able to compete with the developed countries because of the highly subsidized agriculture in those countries, because government gives a lot of fund to those farmers, those who are producing over there. So because of that, those farmers are selling at a cheaper rate. Okay, our government does not provide that much support to the farmers, so the cost is higher here. So okay, so when we sell in the international market, our product is more expensive than their product. So naturally, in that case, we are not able to compete with them. So today, Indian agriculture finds itself at the crossroad. That means which way to go, right? Either to stop or basically depend on other countries, or we have to do what that government or the people have to decide. To make agriculture successful and profitable, proper thrust should be given to the improvement of the cotton of marginal and small farmers. Marginal farmers are, you can say same small farmers are there. The green revolution promised much, but today it is under controversies because a lot of chemical based fertilizers have made the soil derelict and unfertile. A lot of water is also used by those green revolution seeds, HYV seeds, right? And because of that, water table has gone down, the land has become acidic, and you can say, and the taste has also gone. So in that case we have to understand that whether it was good or bad. It is being, that is why you see organic foods are now more in demand, because people are now people have understood that how it has affected badly, to our environment and our health. So it has caused land degradation due to the overuse of chemicals. So this is what given. Drying aquifers and vanishing the biodiversity. The key word today is gene revolution, which includes genetic engineering. Okay, so genetic engineering is a very good career option for you people. So think about it. So what genetic engineering is, it's written. So genetic engineering is recognized as a powerful supplement of inventing new hybrid varieties of seeds. So you can have a tomato of at the size of, let's say, watermelon, right? It can be done easily, if you do the crossbreeding of two seeds. So this is called genetic engineering. I just gave an example, funny example. In fact, organic farming is much in vogue today, because it is practiced without factory-made chemicals such as fertilizers and pesticides. Hence, it does not affect environment in a negative manner. So just consider one case. You are a farmer. Until last year, you were using pesticides and chemical fertilizers in your farm. Now you have decided that I want to become organic. So it is not that from 2021 or 2022 the product will come from the same farm will be organic, because still the chemical substances are very much available in the soil, right? So that will take around 6 to 7 years to make you completely organic. Okay, so you do not become organic from the very next year. All right, so government does the you can say the testing and all these things to make sure that it doesn't have any organic inorganic substances or chemical substances. Then only you get the branding of organic food producer. Okay, so that was this, and let me check how much is left. I want to finish this today only. Yeah, but just give me 5 minutes. Okay, so a few economists think that Indian farmers have a bleak future if they continue growing food grains in the holdings that grow smaller and smaller as the population rises, because of the inheritance law. Okay, the food that means the farms are becoming smaller and smaller generation by generation. So in that case it is not feasible to have big machine to use big machines, and it is not profitable also. So India's rural population is about 833 million. Okay, depends upon 250 million hectares of agricultural land. See the ironical thing here. The book talks about millions, okay, and basically we deal in crore and lakh and all these things, right? So whether the book should either write in the Indian system or you completely have the international system. So 833 million means 83 crore, okay, and 250 million means 25 crore hectare of agricultural land, and average of less than half a hectare per person that comes. Okay, so if you divide the land and the people, you will find that per person we have less than 1 hectare. And how much is 1 hectare? 100 times 100, right? 100 meter and 100 meter, that is 1 hectare, if I know. Okay, so Indian farmers should diversify their cropping pattern from cereal to high value crops. This will increase incomes and reduce environmental degradation simultaneously, because fruits, medicinal herbs, flowers, vegetables, biodiesel crops like jatropha and jojoba need much less irrigation than rice and sugarcane. So these are the crops which people can grow, right, to get more income. But the problem is that if we grow these trees and these crops, what will happen to our food crops? Because these jatropha and jojoba cannot provide us rice and wheat, okay, or the sunflower seeds. If we will grow sunflower seed because it has high value in the market, we will not eat sunflower seed instead of rice and wheat, right? So in that case we have to have a balance, that even if we are growing those things to get more income, but we have to make sure that we should not compromise with our food supply, right? So India's diverse climate can be harnessed to grow wide range of high value crops. Okay, so this was the end of the chapter. Okay, I suppose so. Yeah, so just last line I'm doing. So last paragraph, change in cropping pattern, for example from cereals to high value crops, will mean that India will have to import food. This is what I wanted to say. Okay, it's written already here. So if you are growing, let's say, more jatropha and commercial crop, what will happen to your food crop? So during 1960s, this would be have been seen as a disaster. But if India imports cereals while exporting high value commodities, it will be following successful economy. That we can do. Let's say, because see, I told you in the last in the water class about virtual water. That means 1 kg rice which you grow, if that needs 300 liters of water, just consider that if you are exporting basmati rice to foreign countries, let's say in the Middle East or an Middle East and European and American countries, how much water you are exporting, right? So we have to think that if we are exporting food, we are exporting more water, and already India is a country where water is going to be a serious issue. So in that case, whether we should export food or not, so to get a few dollar, we are compromising with our natural resources. So we have to have a balance, right? So what we can do is that we should grow more high value crops, right? And the low value crops such as wheat, rice and other things we can import from Canada, US, okay, or the other growing countries, so that this is how we can equate, or how we can, let's say, have better margin. So these countries export farm products, let's say fruit, olive and other seeds and wine, and import cereals. So are we ready to take this risk? Debate the issue. So that means it needs huge, you can say, awareness among the people. Government have to make, let's say, long planning for, let's say, another 20 or 30 years. In that, then only it is possible. Okay, you cannot have immediate benefit, okay, to protect our environment, and you have to see that plus and minuses and all these things. So with this chapter is over, right? And MCQs and all these things I will prepare and I will send you within 2 or 3 days, or maybe by next Saturday or Sunday. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, see you later. Okay,
Sir.
bye bye.
Yes, sir.
Bye.